Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome back to my channel, my lovelies. If you've never been here before, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I am so happy you found me. I do so hope that you will like and subscribe before you leave. Become part of the mama family. Mama's got your back, at least where makeup's concerned, and definitely when that makeup is cheap. Today is True Love Tuesday. Very, very excited. I'm always excited to film any kind of video. I just like getting on here and talking to y'all. But if you've never been here for True Love Tuesday, we sit back, we relax, we hang out for a little bit, we listen to an epic love story, and I do my makeup. Today, we're going to focus on base makeup. I have a couple of new things that I want to play with and try out. We're talking about Henry II and Rosamund Clifford today. It's a fairly short story, but it is a very good one. And just maybe something one you haven't heard before. So it should be a good time. I do already have my eyes done. I used the Transluce I Am palette. Y'all, this palette is so incredibly pretty. It's like stupid pretty. On top of that, the shadows just blend themselves. I will have the link for the TikTok on today's eye in the description box below, along with all of the products that I'm going to be using in today's video. I don't usually talk too awful much about the makeup that I'm using, but of course, if you have any kind of questions, all you got to do is shoot me a comment and I will get back to you. The Transluce eyeshadows are very, very quickly becoming some of my favorites. They're so, so good. Speaking of that, have y'all heard about Ipsy and BoxyCharm kind of joining forces? I am equal parts super excited and a little bit just like sketched out about it, because BoxyCharm hasn't been great the last couple of months, and I don't know if that's because they're gonna, like, next month when they join forces, we're gonna get like an amazing box. I don't know. Fingers crossed though, but I would love to know your opinions on that in the descriptions. In the comments. I'd love to know what you guys think about the merger. I think it could be a really good thing, or it could be a really, really bad thing. So we shall see. I'm going to put my hair back and we're going to dive into the story. I got the most adorable little headbands from Burke's the last time I went. I am a sucker for a good headband. I love to have my hair down, and it's like when I put it up in a ponytail holder, something like that, it usually ends up kinking my curls, and it's not the best for your hair either. So I usually like to wear like a headband or a clip. And when you can find these super cute kind of headbands, this one's like really beautiful gold beading, absolutely beautiful. And it is so like, so almost princessy. It just looks so pretty in the hair, and it doesn't damage your hair, but it keeps it out of your face. It's just like hair jewelry, and I'm all for it. Okay, so diving right into today's story. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter one, but we might chit chat after if I'm not like done with my makeup. We'll see how it goes. So Henry II and Rosamund Clifford. So their love story it's not like a typical love story, because not a lot is known about Rosamund as a person. And the reason I kind of picked this love story for this week's True Love Tuesday is just because I thought it was interesting. And I think the most interesting part of the whole story is what people did with their story after they were gone. And we'll get to that towards the end of the video. But I just think it's so funny how people just kind of add and create stories around true events, and they can take something true and turn it into this big giant almost fable. It's so, so funny. So our story starts, Rosamund was known as Fair Rosamund, or the Rose of the World, and she was said to be probably most likely the most beautiful woman in the world at that time, especially if the bards and the poets are to be believed at all. There were so many different, tales written about her, just kind of like praising her beauty, praising her feminine grace, things like that. And, they just kind of really, what is the word I'm looking for? They really blew her up. They really made it seem like she truly was just something to behold. And what ended up happening is she ended up being the Helen of Troy of medieval England. She really caused pretty much a war especially between the king and the queen, because she wasn't the queen, and she was obviously not friends of the queen. But she was very much a big part of the king's life. And in order to get to Rosamund, we first have to talk about the queen. And the queen was Eleanor of Aquitaine. So, Henry had married the infamous Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was 11 years his senior. And again, she was a really beautiful woman in her own right. But when it comes to Eleanor, Eleanor had a lot of sass. Eleanor was definitely not a scared, meek little woman. First of all, I want to take just a break and talk about this. This is the Wet n Wild 5-in-1 Essence Liquid Primer Liquid. Y'all, this stuff is so good. It adds so much glow to the skin. It adds just a little bit of tack. It also goes on and somehow manages to blur out pores. It is the most... It's a perfect base, especially if you have maybe oily skin, because it doesn't feel quite moisturizing, but it goes on and it does a million things at one time. It gives you a really beautiful, sticky, tacky kind of base to really cling to makeup. It blurs everything out. This is so nice. I did put a moisturizer on before I used this primer, but goodness gracious, it is so good. This is probably the second or third time that I've used this. So good. We're going to talk about that in a video later this week, but so good. So like I said, she was not a meek little woman. She definitely was a warrior in her own right. And before she was married to Henry II, she was married to the King of France. And after he had died, well, not died, but she ended up getting an annulment from him because she was unhappy. And really, that's something that's a little bit unheard of, especially for the time. Women weren't usually just granted annulments because they weren't happy. A lot of times they just kind of had to suffer through it. But again, there's just a little bit of a peek into her character. She was unhappy and she decided she didn't want to be married anymore, and she made it happen. On top of that, she was a very wealthy landowner in her own right. So when she came, she was very desirable on the marriage market. And when she married Henry II, it was because that was who she chose to marry. It wasn't like she didn't have a choice. She chose to marry him, and she was pretty much on equal standing with the king. Not really on equal standing because he's the king, you know, but she had herself taken care of. And the marriage between Eleanor and Henry started off as a very happy one. They actually ended up having around 8 children. I think it was 8 children. Yeah, she was more than just rich. She was a warrior and woman of significant courage. Not only did she come with, like, she owned a lot of France. So she came with a ton of money and a ton of land. So her marriage to Henry was super beneficial to Henry. Yeah, their union produced 8 children, 5 boys and 3 girls. And not only did she bring money, land, and power to Henry II, but she also introduced many cultural aspects to court life, such as the game of courtly love, you know, that kind of coquettish, you know, kind of the game that we all see in Regency movies and novels. That was her doing. On top of that, she introduced a code of chivalry for court, and what was the last one? Such as the game of courtly love, the code of chivalry, and troubadours? Anyway, she brought a lot of culture to the English court, and especially for that time, for a woman to have so much influence over not just the king, but over how life was lived at court was pretty much unheard of. And their marriage was super happy until Henry just couldn't keep it in his pants. He just couldn't keep it in his pants, and she just was not having it, basically. She wasn't having it. She was not going to sit there and be made a fool of because he could not stay faithful to her. And this ended up culminating in her encouraging their sons to rebel against Henry, and she kind of caused chaos. But as Henry kind of had these long-term mistresses, she warned him and she warned him, and she wasn't, again, she was a warrior at heart, and she was not one to just kind of sit there and take it. And that's kind of where the, you know, the drama of our story comes from, because she basically made life really, really difficult for both Henry and Rosamund. So Rosamund is reputed to be the daughter of Walter de Clifford, and he was a lord from the Welsh marches. And it's reported that Henry had quite a few, Henry II had quite a few long-term mistresses throughout his marriage to Eleanor, but the one, you know, the kind of most famous one was, of course, Rosamund. And Henry met Rosamund through Rosamund's father. She grew up with 2 sisters and 3 brothers at Clifford Castle, and she had a really, really great young childhood. Her father was a good man, took care of his daughters, and he, you know, of course, he was a soldier. But during, I think, the Welsh campaign, it's possible that her father fought for Henry on a Welsh campaign in the 1160s, and this might have been how they met. And she was fairly young at this time. And they met, of course, while Henry was visiting Clifford Castle, and just kind of stopping in to say hi. Many theorize that they began their affair in 1165 or around this time, but it could have been later. The best guess that historians have is that they had their affair for quite a long while, and they kept their affair secret for a really, really long time. So as soon as Henry announced the affair with Rosamund, things just kind of went south pretty quickly. But building up to the affair is really when all of the love happened, and little else is known of Rosamund until Henry publicly acknowledged her as his mistress, and that happened in 1174. And like I said, by this time they had been together for quite a long while. Now, the thing about it is because, you know, women's desires and things of that nature weren't necessarily taken into account. It's not really known if Rosamund truly loved the king. Many historians, you know, pretty much think that she was indeed in love with him, and that they, you know, because they were together for so long, and Henry definitely had legitimate feelings for Rosamund, and we'll get into that later. There is just a little bit of proof that he actually did love her, but like I said, there's not much information from her side of the story. So we basically just kind of have to take it at face value, and kind of just infer what might have been due to circumstantial facts, and kind of gather everything and just conclude, right? Make our own conclusions. But the announcement, before the announcement, though, they had been together for quite a while. Henry likely resisted making the announcement sooner for practical reasons. Like I said, Eleanor was a very jealous woman. She did not like the fact that Henry had multiple different affairs during their marriage. And like I said, it must have been hard for Eleanor, especially since in the beginning they were so happy. And, you know, back then, especially if you were a king, you basically could do and have whoever you wanted. So even if he had true feelings for Eleanor at one point, which I believe he did, I do believe, like I said, they were very happy in the beginning of their marriage. But when you're surrounded by temptation 24/7, it's really, really difficult to not give into it at some point. And especially when you're the king, you don't have to worry about giving into temptation. It's just you kind of do what you do. But like I said, he must have cared for her in some way, because he did avoid making the announcement that Rosamund was his mistress for quite a while. And they had been seeing each other for years before he makes this announcement. Now, unfortunately, as soon as he makes the announcement, his relationship with Rosamund kind of sours pretty quickly. But the only reason he makes the announcement is in the first place is because his wife, Eleanor, had tried urging her sons to rebel against Henry II in the Great Revolt of 1173 and 1174. And this, I think, just kind of pushed Henry over the edge and was just like, you know what, I don't have to care about her feelings anymore. I don't have to care what she thinks. She's already causing me problems. Screw it, basically. So he announces that she is his official mistress, and things go south really, really quickly. He squashed the rebellion and forgave his sons, but as for Eleanor, he showed her no mercy. And this is why I think that he did genuinely have feelings for her at one point, because the severity with which he punished her kind of reflects that he was hurt, right? He was hurt in some way. And of course, he forgave his sons and ended up, you know, just kind of letting his sons go back to normal. But Eleanor, unfortunately, for the rest of her life, until Henry was gone, she lived for the most part the next 15 years under lock and key and guarded 24/7. She basically lost all of her freedom. Now, she was still treated like she was the queen, because technically they were still married, but she was basically a prisoner. She was a prisoner. And then Henry just kind of took this as the kind of kick in the butt he wanted and was looking for, to just basically go out and do whatever it is that he wanted to do. Henry and Rosamund were open about their relationship as soon as the rebellion was squashed. And I think part of what kind of killed the romance between Henry and Rosamund is the lack of secrecy. And especially when it comes to men with power, they kind of like the secrecy. They like doing something that they shouldn't do. There's that kind of extra little excitement that goes into something being a little bit taboo. And once the taboo-ness of it was gone, I really feel like the excitement, it kind of withered away just a little bit for Henry. And also, I think Rosamund might have kind of overstepped her bounds just a little bit. I think once the announcement was made that she was the official mistress, I think that maybe she tried to gain a little bit of influence. She tried to be a little bit more active in Henry's life and decisions that were being made. Now, this is just speculation. I'm not a history buff. I don't really know anything about it, but I'm just inferring. I'm making my own guesses. But I can assume that she maybe got a little bit too comfortable in her position, and Henry very quickly was like, nope, I'm done. See you later. But again, there is evidence that there was genuine feeling for her, because he did do a few things later on that really kind of confirmed that for everyone. But like I said, as soon as the announcement was made, things went south really, really quickly. After the Henry and Rosamund were open about their relationships after his son's rebellion, but it didn't last long after the announcement. After the affair ended, she withdrew to Godstow Abbey, where she died in 1176, just before turning 30. So the fact that this woman basically lived her whole life before she was 20 and before she was 30, and she's probably been with Henry, she had probably been with Henry for, I want to say, maybe at least like 8 years at this point. So basically her entire adult life was spent being Henry's mistress. And then once he was kind of tired of her, she really just didn't know what to do with herself. There was nowhere else for her to be. So she ended up retiring at Godstow Abbey. And Godstow Abbey is where she had basically finished her education before she became Henry's mistress. So basically going back to Godstow Abbey was like going home for her. And sadly, this is pretty much where her story ends. And I think it's really sad because, again, she was a female, and because her really existence wasn't very important, especially to, important enough to document Back then, we really don't know much about her. She died before she turned 30, which is really, really sad, especially because she was so beautiful and so young. And I don't know, again, we don't know how she really felt about Henry. So she could have just been either forced to be his mistress or not had a choice. She could have been persuaded to become his mistress by her father in order to advance his career, his wealth, and his position. You just never know. Sadly, it's probably the latter. It's probably, it was suggested that she become Henry's mistress because she could help her family. And that's probably what she did, because that's what women were supposed to do back in the day. But I think she kind of lost the will to live just a little bit after Henry was done with her, because she died so quickly thereafter. And unfortunately, more myth than fact is known about Fair Rosamund, but it's the myths, it's the things that were kind of added on after she had passed that I think are the most fascinating. So one legend says that Henry concealed her in a maze in his gardens at Woodstock Palace. He traveled through the labyrinth to conduct his affair with her. And some versions of the story say that Henry followed a thread to the maze's center. Basically, she was his reward for, she was his reward for finding his way through the maze. Then Eleanor caught wind of the liaison, so she breached the labyrinth to give her rival an ultimatum: die by dagger or by poison. And Rosamund ended up choosing the poison and died. Another version of the legend says that Eleanor found out about the affair when she was prepping for her lying in for their last child. Now, like I said, Eleanor and Henry II had 8 children, and the last child that she bore Henry was a boy named John. And while she was preparing, in the olden days, in medieval times, the last 2 or 3 months of pregnancy, a woman was basically forced to be on bed rest. So she was basically bedridden, and in order to, she got to kind of choose where she wanted to have her lying in be bedridden for the last stretch of her pregnancy. And she has decided that she was going to choose Woodstock. She was prepping for her lying in with Henry, their son John. Eleanor selected Woodstock Palace as the place where she wished to settle, but found Rosamund living there as the king's mistress. So Eleanor hurried to Oxford to give birth, and this is kind of what caused the rift between Eleanor and Rosamund. Also, a 14th century source says Eleanor roasted Rosamund between 2 fires. It says she stabbed her and left her to bleed to death. None of these tales, of course, are true. In truth, little is known of the love between Henry and Rosamund. Despite the lack of facts and evidence, historians believe their love was true. This is evidenced by the way Henry treated Rosamund after she died. Now, after she died, he very well could have just washed his hands of the entire situation. He could have just said good riddance and pretty much forgotten about her. But instead of Henry doing that, he actually went to Godstow Abbey and he paid for her to be pretty much memorialized. So he had paid the nuns, he had paid to build a tomb for her. And then on top of that, he paid the nuns to take care of said tomb. And usually, it was very unheard of for a king to do that for one of his mistresses, unless there was true affection there. So at least on Henry's part, the true love part of this true love story was very, very real. He also had her tomb, her headstone engraved, and with a really beautiful kind of, what is it called? The epitaph. And unfortunately, most of it is worn away and you can't read it anymore. But all that remains of her tomb, the letters of which are almost worn out, is the line, "Let them adore, and we pray that rest be given to you, fair Rosamund." And then after that, there's like a little rhyme. It says, "Here in the tomb lies the rose of the world, not a pure rose. She who used to smell sweet still smells, but not sweet." And I don't know if that was added later or what, but I think they kind of vilified her after she passed. And part of it, of course, is going to be jealousy because she was so beautiful. And of course, because she had caught the king's eye and what have you. But they kind of vilified her because, you know, where she once was called the Rose of the World and Fair Rosamund, she then started being called the Soiled Rose or the Fallen Rose. Things like that, just kind of commenting on how far she had fallen and how she was sullied, and basically, you know, a wanton for having been the king's mistress. And I think that's so unfair because, you know, in all probability, she really didn't have a choice whether she was the king's mistress or not. And the best she could have done is just make the most of the kind of crappy situation that she was in. But I love these kind of older medieval tales, especially of kings and queens and things like that, because the power balance is so off, right? It's almost criminal because you have these poor women who are born beautiful, right? Through no fault of their own. And of course, beauty has always been something that has been so coveted by both men and women. Women want to be beautiful and men want to own beautiful, right? And that mentality was so much worse and so much more prevalent back in, you know, medieval times. And she was nothing but an object. She was nothing but an object to be owned and used. And you have to think about what her quality of life must have been like. And again, she wasn't even important enough for people to record any kind of information about her. The only thing that was important enough to be known about her was that she was the mistress to the king. And I think that's really, really sad. Yeah. I know it's a little bit depressing, but it is such a common tale. These kings go out and they search for the most beautiful women, and then these women are kind of like swept. It's like Henry VIII, right? He just took beautiful woman after beautiful woman and kind of used and abused them, and then chopped their heads off at the end. I've been thinking about doing one on Henry VIII, but I think it probably would make me mad. Guys, that's about it for today's story. I don't know. How do you feel? How do you feel about the power play between like older kings and these young women? Do you think that, I'm sure that in some cases they enjoyed being the king's mistresses. I know that in some cases these women went out and tried to catch the eye of the king, right? Because it's a status symbol. It's a way to, you know, help your family. It's a way to gain power and wealth. So it was, of course, useful on both ends. But I do think in some instances, it's just, you know, these women were born beautiful and they were seen as an object to be coveted and owned, and not so much as a person in and of their own right. I think it's really, really sad. Guys, as always, I didn't finish my freaking makeup, but I do want to talk about this really quick. This is the Stila Convertible Color Dual Lip and Cheek Cream. I have this in the shade... What is the shade of this? Because it's absolutely gorgeous. It is my like very favorite blush right now. This is in the shade gerbera. Anyway, it looks like this. It is the most gorgeous peachy orange cream blush. It looks absolutely stunning on the cheeks. It's got a really beautiful glow. It doesn't say stay super sticky on the cheeks, but it just looks so beautiful and healthy and natural and glowy. I just cannot get enough of it. I picked this up at Burke's and I think I paid $5 for it. And that is just a really, really beautiful. I don't know how I feel about it on the lips, but it looks really, really pretty on the cheeks. Yeah, definitely gonna need a lip liner if I were to wear it on the lips, but it just is such a beautiful cream blush. I just cannot even get over it. Guys, as always, I will finish my makeup. I will post finished pictures over on Instagram and Facebook. I will link, or I'll have all of my other social medias linked in the description box: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. As always, no filters, no edits, no fancy lighting. It's just me sitting in front of my camera, playing with some makeup, telling you guys an epic love story, hoping you guys are enjoying what I'm doing. don't forget to give this video a big old thumbs up if you enjoyed today's video. And until next time, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and remember, you're important. Bye.